Forget the usual Isekai formula for a second. What if an entire modern military force walked through a fantasy portal instead of one overpowered teenager? That's the crazy premise behind Gate, an anime where tanks, helicopters, politics, elves, dragons, and magic collide. And honestly, that's why this older series still feels strangely fresh. Gate begins when a mysterious portal suddenly appears in Tokyo's Ginza district. An army from another world storms through, bringing monsters and medieval soldiers with them. Japan's self-defense forces push them back, then send their own troops through the gate into the mysterious special region. At the center is Youji Itami, an otaku and JSDF officer who somehow manages to be both ridiculously laid back and surprisingly competent. Instead of getting a generic reincarnation power, he brings something far more dangerous into this fantasy world: modern military technology, organization, and firepower. And here's the twist that makes Gate stand out. The fantasy world doesn't simply become a playground for the heroes. It becomes a collision between two civilizations with completely different levels of technology, politics, and warfare. One of Gate's most interesting ideas is the power imbalance. Medieval knights can charge into battle with swords and armor, only to discover what happens when they meet assault rifles, armored vehicles, helicopters, and modern artillery. It's basically a fantasy world discovering that plot armor doesn't stop a machine gun. But Gate isn't only military spectacle. The special region has its own cultures, religions, races, politics, and social hierarchies. Elves, beast folk, nobles, gods, and ordinary villagers all exist inside a world that feels much larger than the battlefield. The visual appeal comes from that contrast. You get beautiful fantasy landscapes, ancient ruins, massive dragons, and colorful characters placed beside helicopters, rifles, tanks, and military bases. The clash between old-world fantasy and modern machinery becomes part of the anime's visual identity. The production was handled by A1 Pictures, with Takahiko Kyogoku directing and Jun Nakai handling character design and chief animation direction. The official production material also credits dedicated military supervision and weapons design, showing how seriously the series treated its military side. Here's another hidden detail. Gate isn't really a power fantasy where one character carries the entire story. It constantly shifts between military operations, diplomacy, exploration, and relationships with people from the special region. That makes the anime surprisingly political. The gate itself becomes a strategic resource, and suddenly the question isn't just, who can defeat the monster? It's, who controls access to another world? And then there's Rory Mercury. At first glance, she looks like a typical anime girl designed to sell merch. But she's actually one of the more unusual pieces of Gate's world building. A demigoddess connected to the religion of Emroy, with supernatural power and a completely different understanding of death and battle. Lelei La Lalena adds another layer. She's a young mage who becomes fascinated by the technology and knowledge brought from Japan. Through characters like her, Gate explores something pretty cool. What happens when magic meets modern science? The anime also plays with the classic isekai fantasy hierarchy. In most fantasy stories, humans with swords are the dominant force. In Gate, that assumption gets completely flipped. Modern logistics, communication, firearms, air power, and coordinated tactics become the real game changers. But here's where the series becomes controversial. Some viewers love the fantasy versus modern military fantasy, while others criticize how heavily the story favors the JSDF and how simplistic some of its political messaging can feel. That's not just a modern criticism either. Discussions around Gate have repeatedly praised its core concept, while questioning its portrayal of the Japanese military and the consequences of its power imbalance. One recent Reddit discussion summed up the appeal as modern military versus fantasy, while criticizing the show's shallow treatment of the JSDF. And that's probably the fairest way to look at Gate. It's not a flawless political thriller, and it isn't trying to be Attack on Titan. Its biggest strength is the sheer novelty of watching two completely different worlds collide. The original TV anime aired in 2015, followed by its second cour in 2016. A1 Pictures produced both parts. One important update, though. If you're calling Gate finished, be careful. The original anime run is complete, but a Gate Season 2 has been officially announced for 2027, adapting the newer Gate Season 2, Jieitai Kanochi Night, Kaku Tatakaeri story. So the original anime is finished, but the franchise definitely isn't. The fandom's reaction is complicated. Some fans still love Gate because the core concept is ridiculously entertaining. Watching modern military hardware dominate a medieval battlefield scratches a very specific itch that few anime can replicate. At the same time, longtime viewers often criticize the show's political messaging, harem elements, pacing, and the way certain characters are written. On Reddit, you'll find both nostalgia and harsh criticism sitting side by side. Basically, people can agree that Gate is weirdly addictive while still arguing about whether it's actually good. Its broader reception lands somewhere in the solid but divisive zone. AniList currently lists it at a 74% average score, while IMDb lists the TV series at 7.5/10. Its community tags also heavily associate it with military, isekai, war, politics, alternate worlds, and fantasy. The final take, Althea. So, is Gate a hidden isekai masterpiece? Not exactly. But is it one of the most distinctive military isekai anime of its era? Absolutely. Its greatest weapon isn't the animation or even the characters. It's the premise itself. Take a medieval fantasy world, connect it to modern Japan, and ask what happens when magic meets modern warfare. And here's the mind-bending part. The Gate doesn't just connect two worlds. It exposes how completely different civilizations define power. That's why Gate is still worth remembering. Not because it's perfect, but because even after years of isekai clones, its core idea still feels hard to copy. A portal opens, two worlds collide, and for once, the isekai protagonist isn't the strongest weapon in the room. The modern world is.